Well, good morning. Welcome to our participants and welcome to our guests. I'm delighted to be able to share with you part two of this amazing adventure, driving across Siberia in an Austin 7 1932 vintage car. Today I'm delighted to welcome these special guests. I'll just show them all on the screen now. We've got Chris Blakey, who was behind the adventure in the first place. We then have Will Leith, who joined Chris about halfway through his journey, and he was replaced by Jude Zebedee as the I think Sputnik 5, I think is the correct number. And finally, Chris completed the journey solo across Siberia to go to the 2019 Rugby World Cup. I'm now going to go back to the presentation just to share with you the background to this trip and introduce the first part that we're going to cover within the journey. So I'm going to go back to sharing my slideshow. So for those who were with us the last time, Chris's amazing journey began in Corsham in Wiltshire, and it went all the way across Siberia. It included Finland. It also had a short stop in South Korea before eventually arriving in Tokyo, where he completed the where he was able to watch the opening ceremony of the Rugby World Cup. And during this journey, Chris met some amazing people. And for me, it showed the benefit as an individual of going out of your comfort zone and trying something extraordinary. And if you do that, you will find that you will meet people all over the world, individual people, some of whom had never even seen anybody from outside of their own country before, and all of them have been very helpful, as you'll hear from their story. So, carrying on from part one that we did last week, we're now going to continue the journey, and we're going to start from Lake Baikal in Siberia, and the journey will take us through Siberia to Vladivostok, then onwards to South Korea, and eventually to Tokyo. So we're dividing this journey into three parts. So the first part is going to be discussed and talked about by the people who took that journey from Lake Baikal to Chita, Chris Blakey and Will Leith. So to begin with, I'm going to show a few images from the journey. And I'm going to start the beginning of the journey with Lake Baikal. And I'm going to go now back to our panelists. Chris, what do you remember about Lake Baikal?
Smoked fish.
Smoked fish.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've been, myself and Will, we've been looked after really rather well by the army group that were visiting the cenotaphs, and they kind of adopted us. And Will had been riding with them because there are some hills as you come up and down to get to Lake Baikal. Right. And then I arrived to meet them, and they're all waiting for me in all their lovely trucks with all their stickers. And then we descended down to where there was a cross and some form of shrine and a market, and they have this special fish in Lake Baikal, which we had to eat quite a lot of.
Well, I think we can actually show some of this on screen, some of that adventure. So if we continue with the slides, here we are. This is a scene from Lake Baikal, and if it plays properly, was that a good dip, Chris?
Yeah, well, we said we'd do that, so it was quite right, really. you can't say you've been there if you haven't swum in it, can you? Really?
This is true. This is true.
What you can't see in the video was the fact that we'd just been in the banya with all of the army lot and singing "Drunken Sailor," and then took a small minibus to the lake and jumped in it. So it was extra chilly.
Yeah, I can imagine you going from like a sauna, I guess, to Lake Baikal. Now, here's some of the army guys that you talked about, and the memorial. Would you like to just I'll just go through one or two slides. You see Babushka outside the memorial, and you can see the camaraderie and the bonding going on between you and the army guys. So just share with us a little bit about the army guys.
Go on, Will.
Well, we bumped into them one evening as we stopped for the night after. I think it was a very long day that we pulled, and we stopped at a sort of truck stop, and shortly afterwards a large group of vehicles, all covered in stickers for this cadet tour, pulled up, and they were hugely interested in the car. So we got talking to them, and it turns out that they were on a route that was very, very similar to ours. In fact, pretty much identical, I think. And over the next few days, we bumped into them several times. We'd usually set off very early, so we'd off in front of them, and then they'd catch us up because their cars were much faster than us and overtake us. Then we'd probably see them the following day in exactly the same way. It was quite fun.
Yeah, and they do feature quite a lot in this in the map version of this journey. And now we move on to another picture, which is kind of illustrative. What's happening in this picture, Chris?
Right. Well, we had a bit of a problem with the dynamo shortly after I arrived, actually. So we'd spent a couple of days in Novosibirsk trying to fix the dynamo. We ended up just continuing and running on a dead loss system. So the battery was just running flat, and we had to charge it up every now and again. We bought a spare battery. And then a couple of days later, it started making a really dreadful noise. And turns out that the gear on the distributor had chewed itself up. And there was another issue, which was that one of the bushes had worn out. And so we were a bit stuck, because without the distributor, the car doesn't go. So we got in touch with, we drove past a Kia dealership. No, not a Kia dealership, a Datsun dealership.
Yeah.
That was it. And there's something fun about the Datsun dealership, because the first Datsun was in fact an Austin 7.
Oh, really? Oh.
But they weren't able to help us, but they pointed us in the direction of a small garage that specializes in starter motors and dynamos and that sort of thing. And they basically showed us to Victor, who over the course of a 24-hour period helped us immeasurably and absolutely free of charge. And
yeah.
it was an incredible experience, because he's a 70-year-old chap, very rough-looking bloke. He's got massive biceps and huge pecs, so he was a bodybuilder, and so you wouldn't want to cross him in a dark alley. But he just was the most kind person you can imagine, and not speaking a word of Russian, and didn't stop him from helping us.
Yeah, and I think the picture on the screen now with the monster truck and the little babushka. So that kind of speaks volumes for the relative size of the individuals, perhaps. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, when we arrived at this workshop, there was a pit bull in a cage that was absolutely terrifying. I'm not usually scared of dogs, but this pit bull was absolutely terrifying. Thank God it was behind a cage. and another reason one might think that wouldn't be the sort of place you might stop, but the people really were amazing. So they and if you go to the picture of the people in the workshop again.
Yep. Okay. We'll do. I'll go back one. Hold on.
Get back again.
Yeah, I'll try and go back. There we are.
There you are. So the photo on the right-hand side there is a chap called Arkady and his wife in the background, both working furiously trying to fix up our dynamo. I don't think they took any money for this either. They spent hours and hours and hours trying to fix it, making little parts for it, little shim washers so that it was all spaced out correctly. And I asked him whether or not I could help in any way after about 10 hours of him fixing the car, and he said, "No, don't worry. Go and have a break. Go and have a drink of a cup of coffee or something." And I said, "Look, you ought to have a break as well, because you've been working on this for such a long time." Bear in mind, this is all through Google Translate, so we weren't actually speaking to one another. We were texting on our phones, and it was translating through our phones. And he said, "No, I must continue until victory," was the direct translation.
Right. All right, okay. Yeah. Oh, yes, wonderful. Yes.
And then we tried to give Victor some money for his time in his workshop, and he threatened to beat us up if we played, which was lovely. Not only that, but at about 11 o'clock at night, after a very long day, we didn't have anywhere to stay because we'd been trying to fix this car, and we hadn't really thought about that. But Victor said, "Don't worry, I know somewhere you can stay. Jump in the car." So we jumped in his Land Cruiser, drove all the way across town, and we arrived at this 1960s sort of block of flats, I guess. It looked very Cold War-esque, relatively unwelcoming actually on the outside. It's straight-sided buildings, nothing ornate or anything, and it was his flat, his home, and he'd driven us all the way back to his house, his tiny little 2-bed apartment, and his wife had cooked us a dinner of, I think it was a chicken stew. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And her name is Irina.
Yeah, and so we had a lovely chicken stew. His wife had made up the second bedroom for both of us, so we had a very comfortable night's sleep.
Incredible.
And we shared a bottle of whiskey together.
Oh, well, there you are. What wonderful hospitality! What wonderful hospitality! And it would be nice to think that if some Russians came to our country and couldn't speak a word of English on a similar sort of exercise, that they might get the same kind of help from local communities. But this story that you've just given has been repeated over and over again throughout the journey. So yeah. moving on to I've got this down as Chita. I'm not sure where it is, but whether it is Chita or not.
That's Chita, yeah.
It is, which is where you swapped with Jude effectively on the journey. Chris, do you want to say a few words about this picture?
Yeah, I mean, what happened now was really rather odd, because the guy in the green shirt named Yuri, and again through rugby, I never knew these people at all. And the people in Krasnoyarsk had contacted the rugby club in Chita, of which he was the captain. They don't even have enough players to field a 15-a-side team. They've only got 13 players. And he came out, and I never knew him at all. And I was driving along, and a car came the other way, lights flashing, horn going, out jumped 4 blokes. And I thought, what's going on here? And he introduced himself again, like Will says, with Google Translate, that he just heard I was coming and wanted to take me into town. Now, he works for the government, and the guy with the blue tie is the mayor, basically, of Chita, which is a big old city. And so he came out and gave me that lovely book and a kind of a I don't know, freedom of the city for the day type thing. And it went on from there because then the army people arrived and then Jude arrived. Fantastic. And the thing that got me about that whole thing is, you know, David, I talk about serendipity.
Yes.
That they put me up in one of their apartments they had for some of their young rugby players. And I got up early to leave and I went in for a shower and I had to move all the clothes that were above the bath. And I took one down in the dark because I didn't want to wake everybody up. And I looked at this thing and I thought, that is not right. And I used to coach, and one of my sons played for a long while for a little rugby club in Whitney. And there it is. And that shirt in the middle of Siberia was hanging over the bar. Now, how's that work out?
Yes.
The guy on the right there, his name slips me, but he found it in a second-hand shop in Chita, and it came from Oxfordshire. And I say, my boy, who's the rugby player in France, he's got a shirt exactly like that. Incredible, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, when you think about probabilities, what are the chances of you finding that rugby shirt in the dark in Chita? They're just unbelievable. But you know, your adventure is laced with many similar examples of serendipity, and that's a wonderful example. And we could probably talk for hours about the number of occasions when things have come together in a way which would be highly improbable, and it's happened in my life as well. And if there's a message for young people who are watching either this live or watching a recording, if you just go out of your comfort zone and just try something, you will find that serendipity really will work for you. So moving on from there, we now get to the point where we go for the changeover between Will and Jude. So did you two guys get to meet each other, or did you catch your train, Will, or
no,
did the three of you get together?
What happened in the end was, because Chris and I had been delayed for a couple of days in getting to Chita, so I actually had to leave early from Ulan Ude. So we were staying in this sort of army barracks type thing with a parade ground, and that's where the photo of us all with our hands on the table saying goodbye. That was when I left. And then
right.
The chap that was doing the drone cinematography, Vladimir, I think.
Vladimir, yeah.
Yeah, he drove me in the middle of the night to the train, which was I didn't have much cash left, so I got third class on the sleeper train, and I got a bed, which was fantastic. So Vladimir introduced me to a very nice girl called Natasha on the platform, and he'd never met her before. I'd never met her before. This is in the middle of Siberia, so there's no chance of that. Anyway, we spent 12 hours, I think, on the train. I think the first 6 hours we were asleep. And when we arrived in Chita, she was meeting up with her husband, and she called me a taxi because she knew a taxi driver. So I got in this taxi. It didn't look like a taxi, it just looked like a car. And bear in mind, everything that I've experienced so far over the last 2 weeks, I still had this sort of thing in the pit of my stomach where I thought, oh God, this might not be a taxi. What's going on here? It turned out it was this young chap who was absolutely lovely. He didn't take much money because I told him I didn't have much, and my cards weren't working, so I couldn't get any more. And he introduced me to a chap called Michael Shipley, who was an American who'd spent the last 20 years living in Chita. And I spent the evening with Michael doing a full tour of the city. We went out for drinks. He took me to a very, very cheap bed and breakfast type thing. I had £8 cash, the equivalent of, in my pocket for two days, I think. and we managed to do it. He bought me dinner and he bought me lunch for the following day as well, and introduced me to his wife and his two stepsons. Went up to the top floor of this block of flats, and then on the way back from the block of flats to the where I was staying, I bumped into the brother of the taxi driver.
Wow.
And
another
driver. It was really peculiar how it all sort of came together. It was just a really lucky experience where I just happened to bump into the right people.
Yeah,
You know?
I think serendipity is the word for it, and as I said before, the whole story is laced with this serendipitous activities. So if we move on, let's just have a look, if I can, to share where we are on Google Earth. Can you see the map? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this shows on Google Earth the route of the journey, and what it allows me to do is to zoom in to the story, and your involvement started in Novosibirsk, and you went along the route. We've now started Lake Baikal. We've been to Ulan Ude, and now we're at Chita, which is where Jude comes into the scene.
I think I saw Jude on the aeroplane because she was disembarking on the aeroplane that I was getting onto. So I didn't know who I was looking for, but I'm sure I would have seen her at the airport.
All right.
I don't think there were any of us on that plane.
No. I'm sure there probably weren't. So Jude, just say a little bit about how you came to involve this story, because you'd never met Chris before you decided to drive with him across Siberia, did you? So what on earth possessed you?
No, it was one of those. No idea. It was one of those slightly random moments. I think it was the 13th of July that year. I was sitting in my camper van in a field in Wales, and I received a message from my friends Mark and Sue Farrell, who were driving a converted Land Rover ambulance across similar route to Chris, but they went through Mongolia, but they were driving out to the Rugby World Cup as well. And Mark had said, "Oh, I've heard about this mad bloke who's driving out in an Austin 7, and he's lacking a co-pilot for part of the journey." And I sort of said, "Well, sounds interesting," but I'd never heard of an Austin 7, so I quick Googled it. It was a bit disappointing because I was thinking more along the lines of Aston Martin, but there you go. And I spoke to Chris that evening. I think I rang him and he was in Hull, just about to depart on the ferry. A couple of weeks later, I went up to London and got my Russian visa. I booked a flight, and 20th of August, I flew out. And on the 23rd, I met Chris in Chita, having never set eyes on him before, and just, it was an adventure.
So what was it? Yes. Yeah.
Can I just say that it all came out of the blue? I mean, I was literally, we were getting onto the ferry, and this lady appears, and so I thought, well, this is very weird. And, I don't know this woman, and, it's not going to be a piece of cake, this. I think, for a young woman to want to do this kind of thing, she's got to be fairly special. And then she, of course, gave me her history, and really, it was the meal ticket, because I don't know any other woman who would actually cycle around the world on her own. So I thought, well, fair game, really,
And spoke Russian as well.
And spoke Russian, yeah.
Yeah, true. It was a bit rusty, to be fair.
Yeah, but still, remarkable serendipity again. So now going back to the slideshow, seeing where we are. So we're now in Chita, and if we move forward, the next thing I want to share with you was. Having just met this guy, it must have been quite a bit of a shock to get yourself involved in this this drunken dinner. I'll just play the video.
Early in the morning.
Put him in a bed with a captain's daughter. Put him in a bed with a captain's daughter. Put him in a bed with a captain's daughter. Early in the morning. Hooray!
So I guess you weren't prepared for that, and probably even less prepared for this, Jude. So do you want to pick up the story here?
Yeah, I must say that my Russian speaking skills didn't extend to translating hooray and up she rises. I think at that point I was just helping Chris out by drinking his vodka because he wasn't too keen on knocking it all back. So I helped him out on that front. But the next day, bearing in mind I'd only known Chris for about 24 hours, we were, yes, cruising along nicely with a massive thunderstorm following behind us. And all of a sudden we lurched rather dramatically to the right. And I must say that I was quite glad it was to the right because I was sitting on the left and I was always worried it'd be my side that would suffer from the strain of my weight. But anyway, the back right wheel went scooting past us straight down the road. And not really knowing Chris, I wasn't quite sure how he was going to react to this, so I just jumped out and said, I'll go and get the wheel. So I trotted off down the road to let him assess the damage, and yeah, he'll probably tell you the rest of the story.
Yeah, so do you want to pick it up from there,
I mean,
Chris? What happened
because I'm trying to do the book, there is an interesting thing here that just before the week, and it involves Mr. Leith over there, that about 2 weeks before I was due to leave, I got hit in the back of the car, and it was on that back wheel area, and all of that back end of the car was very badly damaged. And where Will works at Roach Manufacturing, they are the people, or the son is now, it was grandfather before, and they actually built the car. They actually built the body. It's called an RTC body. And I was distraught because I didn't know what was going to go on because I had no time left. And they very kindly rebuilt this back wing for me. But I never did check those bolts on that side of the car where it had been hit on that wheel. And then with all the very, very bad roads that we had to face, and we're talking seriously big holes where sometimes we'd go and drive in the field because it was better. And I have the feeling that that's what started that problem. And that's when, the poor old three little studs that had enough really and decided they didn't want to play anymore. And it was quite a scary time.
Yeah, I guess it was lucky that Jude spoke Russian as well. That must have been a bit of a help.
Well, I'm not sure on this occasion because I think our problem was fairly obvious to anyone who came up to have a look.
I guess so, yeah.
But it was quite surprising how many people pulled up, had a look and went, oh, that's a problem, and then just drove off again. It was like
Can I just add a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure.
How we got out of that. And that was because after Chita, and I'd been given the book by the mayor, I received a WhatsApp from the president of the county. So it'd be like the county council chairman. And all he'd said was, look, if you're ever in trouble, we'd love to help. Please keep in touch type thing. And just before this happened, I'd got another call from a bloke called Eugenie, who I'd never met. And he just said, look, I'm in a place called Mogocha. I run the local government place there. If you have any problems, give us a ring type thing. And so that's exactly what I did. I just got on the phone to this bloke and said, look, we're in it now. We are in deep mire here. Yes. And we just waited. I managed to tie the wheel on so we could push the car along. And the cavalry arrived, really, all in suits.
Yeah. Wonderful. So what about this picture, Chris? Misha, his name is, I believe. What's the background to that?
Well, all the way across, as we all know, they do tend to supplement their income by selling things on the roadside. So you get loads and loads of people with gardens. They all have allotments and gardens, and they're always flogging, vegetables and fruit and honey. They're very keen on honey, much more than we are in this country. And there wouldn't be a day go by you wouldn't find some stalls selling honey. And anyway, this is a stall. I just said, well, let's buy some honey. We popped off, and this lovely chap here, what a face that is. Yes. And there he was, and he had 80 beehives in the woods around. And that's what he did. I think that's how he made his money. And he also made handles for spades and things like that. Yeah. But he was just a lovely old bloke, really. Absolutely amazing character.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, these adventures bring up wonderful memories. Here's an example, perhaps, of one of the kinds of roads that you were talking about that might have done some damage to your car. Was there anything that happened in Vera that you wanted to share?
Come on, Jude. Vera's
Yeah.
your
Vera is an interesting one because we had a very long day driving and we were determined to try and get to, I can't remember which city it was, but it was obvious we weren't going to get there before dark and the roads were, you know, dodgy enough in the daylight. So we were getting really late in the day and we stopped to get an ice cream actually at a little shop, and the mosquitoes were shocking. We were just bitten to death in seconds. And this kind lady in the shop had said, oh, you know, if you look for somewhere to stay, you're very welcome to come and stay in my little house. And Chris sort of looked at me and went, oh, not sure about that one. So we sort of ploughed on a bit, and we were looking at the prospect of having to spend the night in a very small two-man tent with the mosquito net zipped up and nothing to eat. And we were like, oh, well, if we have to do it, we have to do it. In the end, we pulled off to a petrol station, and I said we were literally middle of nowhere. There was nothing around. And I said to the lady in the petrol station, is there somewhere we can stay? She said, oh, yes, of course, just carry on down that road. And sure enough, in the middle of nowhere, we came to this brand spanking new railway station, which had rooms above it. And they were absolutely sparkling clean. And yeah, we spent the evening in absolute luxury. We found ourselves something to eat, and we were really well looked after by the staff there. But then I had to spend all evening talking to one of the local guys because Chris was trying to do something with his WhatsApp, and then he said, so we sat there and got through about a bottle and a half of vodka with me just rambling on as usual.
Yeah, but vodka seems to play quite an important role in this story. I'm picking up a bit of a trend. And there you are, the two of you. I've got this down as Khabarovsk, and I understand in that part of the world there was quite a bit of flooding. Is that what this picture is about? Is that anything to do with the flooding, or just washing your clothes?
Well, actually, what happened there, and this is quite amazing, you know, we can't manage to fix potholes in our road. The whole road had been washed away in a flood, and this is the queue of vehicles. And we were just drying some kicks as we were wet, and we just had to sit there. And literally, as we sat there, there were lorries coming piling by, and trucks and machinery and all that. And within about 4 hours, they'd actually just rebuilt the road. I mean, it'd been completely washed away. They brought in tubes and everything to lower in to get the water to run through, and they brought in the stone and the gravel, and they rolled it. And you know, within 4 hours, where there had been no road, everyone was moving again. It was quite impressive, really.
Yeah, and in this country, of course, we're paralysed when we had a bit of snow on the road. So yeah, it's quite a good example. What about these two guys, Alexander and Alexander?
Go on, Jude.
And we were driving into this small town one evening, and again it was getting late and the sun was right in our eyes, and Chris was pretty tired from all the driving, and we were just thinking, oh, we just want to get into this town, find somewhere to stay. And we got flagged down by a police car, and we thought, oh, here we go. But as Chris experienced all the way across Russia, the police were nothing but helpful. And these two chaps jumped out of their car, find out what we were doing, and escorted us with blue lights to the nicest hotel in the area, got us checked in. And yeah, they were just great. Sasha and Sasha, so two Alexanders. But I think Chris was just a bit worried they both want to sit in the car together. I don't think we'd have ever got them out again.
Again, yeah, another fantastic example of hospitality and serendipity coming together. So now we come to Vladivostok, where you said your goodbyes. There's one or two pictures here. What about this garage? This again was a bit of serendipity, Chris.
Yeah, well, we'd managed to find a small hostelry that we're going to stay in. And I was quite concerned always about the car just being left out and, you know, something disappearing that we needed. And a lovely man who I'm in touch with almost weekly still, he owned a second-hand tyre workshop next to this hostelry. And he took out his rather flash car, a sports car, Japanese sports car, so that we could put the Austin in. And lovely man called Michael, and he looked after me really, because that was the point where we'd got to, and Jude had to leave and I had to wait for the ferry, so I had a bit of time on my hands to sort things out and work on the car before moving on. And that's the garage basically, where he very kindly put us in and left the car there for about a week actually.
So I guess Michael's car was more the kind of car that you would have liked to have gone in, Jude,
No.
across the side.
No, I would never change Babushka for anything now.
No,
And actually,
no,
I was surprised at just how comfortable a ride Babushka was. I looked at her and thought, oh my goodness, I'm not even going to fit in there. And yet it's the most, I normally suffer really badly from restless legs. Not once did I have a problem, and we had long days in the car. And yeah, just the most comfortable little thing to ride in. She's wonderful.
Yeah,
yeah.
and I mean, they always have been known to be incredibly good doers. They use them for off-roading and for trials and for racing, and no, they're just fantastic little cars, really, absolutely. And because they kind of a high ground clearance, I mean, he'd never be able to drive his sports car down some of those Russian roads because he just wouldn't go.
I don't think he took it out in the rain either.
Out that I'm 6'5", and I fit in this little tiny car. So.
Yeah, that's remarkable, and also it's probably worth mentioning again, because this I think is relevant for any people from the younger generation that are watching. One of the attractions of the Austin 7 when it was manufactured was the fact that it was a car that could be looked after and maintained and fixed by ordinary people. Isn't that right, Chris? That was one of the things that, as you found, when things went wrong, you could actually tinker about with it and fix it. Whereas, yeah, sorry.
That's right. I mean, they can be either. I mean, if you think about one of the things that motivated me for this, was the fact that in the 1930s, a guy called Hector Macquarie and Gladys de Havilland, I mean, separately, they went around the world. So if you can do that then, which is one of the reasons I thought, well, it can't be that difficult, can it really? You've got to be able to, and the problems that you come across are opportunities to meet people.
Chris, I think
and the car is a very simple little machine compared.
I think your biggest problem, though, Chris, was the fact that the Russians had never heard of the imperial system when it came to measurements.
That's right.
They just didn't get the hang of the fact that it wasn't metric.
No, but there were lots of different things, lots of different mechanical problems. Of course, that's the downside of the older car technology. They do tend to go wrong more often than modern cars, but they do give you the opportunity to fix things. And when you're fixing things, you learn about how these vehicles work, and so maybe that's something that's missing in our modern lives. We've got our smartphones and all kinds of devices where if it goes wrong, well, we just can't take the back off and fix it. We have to pretty much replace the whole thing. So maybe that's something that's missing from modern life. Yeah. Okay, on that philosophical note, I move on to the next slide, and this is Vladivostok again. Are these the English bikers on motorbike riders? Is that are they the two bike riders?
Yes, they were. Yes, they caught up with us. I think I can't remember, a little way before Vladivostok. And I don't know who was more surprised, us to see two English bikers or them to see an Austin 7 with English number plates. So they they flagged us down, I think, on the side of the road, didn't they, Chris? And then we caught up with them in Vladivostok and had a couple of drinks and a burger or two.
I think we were amazed because they obviously flew by us, and I said to Jude, "God, they're English plates." So I banged on the old horn a bit, and they looked around, and again they stopped. But what's interesting is, of that whole time that I was going across Russia and Will and Jude, I met one Englishman in Moscow, and then these two at the other end of Russia. There was no other English people. We never ran into any. It was quite, and that was what was amazing. And these guys were going around the world, and they were going to leave their bikes. They were going to get their bikes to. I think they were going. I've forgotten where they were going to go to after that. But they were going to leave their bikes, come home, and then go back, and then go across America. So they were going around the world on their bikes.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were using the same company we were using to ship their bikes. That's how. That's and again how we met up under that umbrella was when we were going to sort that one out. But lovely chaps, yeah.
Yeah, so another connection. And I think you said to me before that in quite a number of places that you visited in Siberia, they'd never seen anybody from outside their own country. Is that right?
Well, the mayor, as I understand it, the mayor of Chita said that to me when he gave me this nice book.
Yeah.
He said I was the first Englishman that he knew he'd met in Chita, which is, you know, it's a big old city, really.
Right.
And that happened quite a long way across the route. You know, when I was well, you know, and we met there. We met lovely Victor and his lot. They hadn't come across English people before either.
And was it your first time in Russia, Will? Have you been to Russia before?
I've never been to Russia before. That was my first time.
Right. Okay. So quite an adventure for you as well. Will, I didn't ask you to just say a little bit about your involvement with the Austin Seven. Is that the connection that you had with Chris, with the Austin Seven club?
So yeah, I've always tinkered with Austin Sevens. My dad had them when he was young, and yeah, I got into them. I bought my first Austin 7 when I was 19, and it took a few years, but I built it up into a little racing car. And I take that hill climbing and sprinting around the country. Hopefully that'll start this year again. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And I met Chris at the Bewley National Austin 7 rally. It's got to be 4 years ago now. And he approached me after seeing me do quite a spectacular but not very competitive run around the driving test there. And he approached me and he said, "You're nuts. Do you fancy driving across Russia in that?" And things went there.
He made you an offer you couldn't refuse. Yeah.
So straight away, I really wanted to do it. Now, I mean, for most of the time over the 3 years that Chris was planning it, I was planning to drive my own car. But for various reasons, I couldn't do that. So I had to stay involved, and thank goodness, because I had an amazing time out there.
Yeah, fantastic. Jude, now you're going to have yourself featured next Thursday in telling your own story about going around the world on a push bike, you know, which is quite not every lady I meet has been even on a push bike, let alone ridden around the world. So we'll have a chance to hear more about you on Thursday. But what were you doing when you got to Vladivostok? What was your plan after
that? Well, because I was only on the 3 weeks annual leave from work, which my boss had very kindly given me with 2 weeks notice, I was on a bit of a schedule. So I was planning to head out to Japan to meet up with Mark and Sue Farrell, because it was Mark's 60th birthday while we were there, just immediately before the Rugby World Cup. And so unfortunately I couldn't sort of wait for the ferry. So I had a few days in Vladivostok, which was fabulous, because the first time I was there was in 1991. And at the tender age of 20, I'd taken the Trans-Siberian there on my own after spending a year in the Soviet Union. And it was amazing to be back there again. So I had a few days in Vladivostok, and then I had a flight out to Tokyo and spent, I think, about 10 days with Mark and Sue and their family who'd flown out to see them, celebrated Mark's 60th, and then had to fly home the day before the blooming rugby started. So I never saw a single game of rugby.
Oh, well, you win some, you lose some. I want to move on now on the journey, because we're getting to Babushka arriving in Japan, and you had quite a welcome in Sakaiminato, if that's the way it's called. Here are some of the...
Here I am. I arrived in Japan today and was received by a fantastic group of people, and this lot here have all volunteered to become the Japanese branch of AVC.
Wow. Yeah. So that's your welcome committee.
Here I am.
But also you were featured on Japanese primetime television. I've got a little short video clip of that when you we're in Sakaiminato. Let's have a quick look at that. Was that a bit of a surprise for you, Chris?
Yeah, didn't expect that at all, really. I had got a contact over there, John Bolger, who was in that picture now, who had contacted me because he lived in Japan, and he was nothing to do with it. He said he might be able to get some time off and meet me. I didn't know. I had no contact. But I'd also had contact with one of the motor magazines over there. And that was a funny old story which I won't go into about how that happened. That was weird. And they must have then decided that it was a newsworthy item. And a guy called Junichi, who was in that picture, really was a diamond. And he started to pull all these other people in together, really, because he actually knew everyone who had anything to do with old cars, really. And he was very, very useful indeed.
Yeah, again, that was a tremendous serendipitous story, which we don't really have time to go into today. But when you continue your journey, you hadn't got very far before you had another bit of a disaster. Do you want to say something about that?
Well, it's just one of those things, really. You've got to remember that most parts in an Austin 7 are over 80 years old. I mean, you can rebuild certain things and get it all as well as you can, but you know that's what you're dealing with. And unfortunately, I was going up some hills after having left Sakaiminato, and I just lost power, and it was all a bit weird, really. And the giveaway really was white smoke coming out the back of the car. And that tends to mean you've got water that's gone into the system. And I was a bit concerned that it may have been more serious and that it could have been a problem with either piston or piston ring or something like that. Literally, we stopped at the roadside to try and do it. And Junichi, bless him, he said, look, let's pretend that I own half your car. And I said, well, why is that then? He said, because if that's the case, I'll use my breakdown card. So he rang up his breakdown company, who brought this truck out in the middle of the night and shipped me off to a garage. They couldn't do anything with it. They just didn't have the tools really either. And it was beyond them, if you like. So we all, that whole group of people, went and stayed in a hotel, which I don't know who paid for it, but I didn't. And anyway, next morning he said, we're going off to this place, which you'll see in a minute. And your car's gone there. I said, what do you mean my car's gone there? Anyway, there's a lovely lad called Kojiron who's here somewhere, and that's his father on the left. And look, what's in the back of this picture? There's a little Austin 7.
Wow.
And, basically, he had an Austin 7, this lad, and his father was a retired aeroplane engineer, and he had a workshop. And by the time I got there, they'd driven 2 hours, fetched the car, brought it back, taken it to bits. Absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. And I mean, again, they knew lots of people who were interested in old cars who turned up to take pictures, and they were just glorious. And they have a place.
Here we are, a bit of a video of them working on it.
My Japanese is brilliant. I didn't know the word. So there he is. Sputnik.
There he is, Sputnik 6. So again,
now that's Kojiron. Now he's an interesting chap because not only is he, he's a chip off the old block of his father. He hardly speaks to anybody. He is such a quiet character. And he basically worked it all out and he had the head off by the time I got there, and he'd already found out that the head gasket had blown. And basically, we spent the day and put it back together again. And I just said to him, look, how do you fancy a ride to Tokyo? And he said, I don't like Tokyo. I said, oh, have you been? He said, only once, I'm not going again. He said, no, I don't like that. I like living here. And he lives in the country and he looks after the cars. He's actually built a car, which is an Alvis, which is an English car, but he's put a Gypsy Moth aeroplane engine in it. And he built that as well. So he's quite a character, really. Anyway, I bent his arm, basically, and his parents' arm, and they bent his arm. So then he joined me for the drive all into Tokyo. And he'd only ever been there once before.
Wow, wow. Again, and this is a picture that I really like. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, this is just there's Mount Fuji in the back, and again, Junichi that's his job. He's a photographer, and he writes for motor magazines. So, you know, if you like, in exchange for all the good contacts and the efforts he gave me, which were right the way through the Japanese section, you know, I had to give myself up for photo shoots and advertising, car polish, and all sorts of stuff, which is what he was doing, and it was just nice to be part of that, really.
Yeah, and what a spectacular photograph that is. And I like these as well. This was, you had pride of place in an uptown Tokyo department store, I believe.
Can I just mention the cars on the left? Because,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know, Will, what they're worth, but, you know, you're looking at, you know, a lot of money, aren't you? 2 Heelys like that.
Yeah.
And I just came down from breakfast in this little hotel to find them sitting there. And then they'd already put stickers all over my car. And then they presented me with, which I now have on the car. And I'm a half member of the Austin Healing Club of Japan, because I haven't got the Healy part. I've just got the Austin. And they thought that was most amusing. They said, we'd like to, you know, give you membership of our club, but you're only half a member. And they basically drove one in front, one behind, plus John Bolger's Land Rover, plus Junichi's Land Rover. It was a cavalcade. And we just drove all the way through. Very bad day. It rained a lot that day. And we drove into Tokyo. You can't park. You're not even allowed to buy a car unless you've got an allocated parking space. Junichi again, he contacted a shop, which was a place that specialised in selling English clothing. And there we are. I'm in the shop window as a garage.
Yeah. Yeah, not a lot of people can say that. What about this picture? You went to, is this the where the spa was in Kinugawa?
Yeah, there were several. I mean, everywhere you go in Russia, you get a banya.
Yeah.
You get a freshwater spring spa all over Japan. They have lots of these hot springs, being close to the old, you know, warm water underneath. They drill down, and they're historically was. And this is Kinugawa. Is also a very, very lovely monastery as well.
Yes, yeah. So you had some beautiful pictures. Unfortunately, we don't have time to show all of those. But now we are in the stadium, and these are your friends from Krasnoyarsk, I believe.
Amazing. They come. I mean, I didn't expect to meet them again. I knew they would be at the opening ceremony, but I couldn't get a ticket because I just couldn't get a ticket. Blow me down. They contacted me when I was just approaching Tokyo and said, "Are you there yet?" And I said, "No, but it looks like I'll make it." And they said, "Well, we've got a bit of good news. Would you like to join us as our guest for the opening ceremony?" Well, the ticket was 600 quid. So, you know, likes of me, you know, do that was not on really. So that's Sergey, who's the president of the club, and his wife, and it's Archie who took the picture, who was going to join us today, but he's gone hunting. It's only minus 22.
Oh, right. So it's relatively warm.
Nice game.
Yeah, there's some nice videos here, and here's some more of your.
Yeah, I saw that. Joe show.
And then the opening ceremony. So really, all in all, a fantastic adventure, Chris. So if you were to say anything to the young generation today about your adventure, what advice would you give to young people who want to do something extraordinary in their lives?
Well, generally, I've been working with young people all my life, and it's always a case of making them realise they're capable, much more capable than they think they are. And that I think, as Jude once said to me, it's all about it's taking that first step. It's about actually believing in yourself and believing in other people and wanting that adventure. And it interests me a lot about what makes the difference between people, where some people don't want adventure, some people want extreme adventure, and there is a complete range of adventures in between that. And you've only got to look at, I've just written it down here, a bloke called LeCam, Jean LeCam, 61 years old. He's just sailed solo around the world in the Vendée Globe race. He came fourth.
Right.
61,
Yeah.
Now, I mean, there's a classic example of top end, really quite dangerous, committing adventure. And I just want people to keep thinking about doing things, really.
Yes.
And as you say about mending cars, that there is something if you make a bit of an effort, you will get a reward.
Yes, yeah. Will, what about you? Are you an adventurer, or was this just a one-off for you? I mean, hill climbing in a vintage car, I suppose, is quite adventurous, but are you naturally adventurous yourself?
I think I've always been quite naturally adventurous. I think my career path has been pretty unusual. I think that's a safe thing to say. I trained in exploration geology at university, and then went straight out to work in West Africa. I spent some time out in West Africa on a gold exploration project, and also spent time in Australia, in the middle of nowhere by myself. That could be considered an adventure in its own right.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, it sounds pretty adventurous to me. And Jude, what about you? What possessed you to want to cycle around the world on your own?
I got bored at work. No, I'd always wanted to do something. And I found myself at a point in my life where I had no dependents and I had nothing particular to commit to. My family were all well and healthy. And I thought, this is the time to do something if I'm going to do it. And I'm far too unfit to walk to the South Pole. And I knew I'd never get up Everest. So, yeah, cycling was just something I thought I could do, because you could take it at your own pace, and just all you need is to be happy in your own company and the tenacity to just keep going, I think.
Well, I think all of you have shown tenacity in spades, and also ingenuity and adaptability, and all of the things which are wonderful attributes that young people can aspire to. I'm now going to finish off with just a few final slides before I bring you back again and say thank you to all of you. So we go back to the slide presentation. So we've in this little live audience with Chris, Will, and Jude, we've taken a journey from Lake Baikal to the Tokyo Stadium for the Rugby World Cup 2019 Olympics. So just to tell you that the next episodes in these live audiences with extraordinary people, the next one will be on Thursday, and it will be with Jude, and it will be on Thursday the 4th at 2 o'clock GMT, and that will be followed the next day by another extraordinary adventurer. Robert Swan is the first person to walk to both the North Pole and the South Pole. And he's going to be sharing his story with us, along with a friend of mine that I've known from the university, called Joe Little, and together they're going to be sharing their experience and also the plans for finishing the last trip that Robert made to the Antarctic, walking across the Antarctic. So I'd now like those of you who are with us just to log off now and complete the survey form. And I just want to say thanks very much to guys for your input and telling the story. I'm going to give each of you a chance to just say a few final words before we finish the event altogether. So starting in the bottom right, Will, anything you want to say?
Thank you very much to everybody. Chris, you're a legend. Well done for making it happen. Wouldn't have done it by myself. I know you probably would have. But yeah, I'm very glad to have been a part of it, and hopefully we'll have another adventure soon.
Great, thanks, Will. And you, Jude?
Yeah, I also want to say thanks to Chris for just taking a punt on some random woman who literally turned up with no notice whatsoever. Because, as you know, the Austin 7's a very small car, and 10 days could have been a very long time had either of us not got on. So he took a big risk, and thank you, Chris, for doing that. I had a fantastic time.
Yeah. And Chris, finally, from you, you are a modern day hero adventurer, and I'm sure your schoolmates at Boston Grammar School, where we both went in our younger days, must have been very proud of you. And I guess the time that you had as head choir boy at Boston Stunt must have been quite useful for the drunken sailor, did it?
Yeah, anyway, can I just say thank you to Will and to Jude, because they put up with me, really, because you know, it was a case that we had to get on, and there were stresses and strains on all the system, and we got through it all, and it wouldn't have been the same without them. So I was very fortunate that they joined in, and they added to the quality of the whole thing, really. And yeah, I'm very proud of that.